She was a billionaire headed to the most important deal of her life, until a barefoot boy appeared outside her mansion and said just 5 words. "Please don't go today." What he knew, how he knew it, and what happened next will leave you absolutely stunned. This isn't just a warning, it's a story of fate, second chances, and a truth buried deep in the past. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from all corners of the world. Now let's jump into the story. It was a hot afternoon, the kind where the air feels heavy and everything moves just a little slower. The streets near the edge of the city shimmered in the heat. In the distance, tall glass buildings stood proud, reflecting the sun like mirrors. But just a few blocks away, the world was very different. Dusty sidewalks, cracked pavement, and small shops with peeling paint. Behind a tall iron gate, a red car waited in front of a large mansion. It was one of those houses that looked like it belonged in a magazine, the kind where everything was polished, quiet, and expensive. In the driver's seat sat a man in a black suit, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel and glancing at the front door. Inside the mansion, Marla Voss stood in front of a mirror. She was known across the country, maybe even the world, a billionaire, a genius in business. Some called her cold, others called her smart. She didn't care either way. She was focused, sharp, and always in control. Today was one of the biggest days of her career. She was about to close a deal that would make headlines everywhere. Marla buttoned her blazer, smoothed down her sleeves, and slipped on her gold watch. She gave one last look in the mirror, nodded to herself, and walked toward the door. Her high heels clicked on the marble floor as she stepped outside. The heat hit her as soon as she walked out. Her driver opened the door, but something caught her eye. Just past the security line near the sidewalk stood a small figure. A boy, thin, maybe 10 years old. He wore a yellow shirt that was too big for him and jeans that were torn at the knees. His feet were bare, and his face was dusty. But what Marla noticed most were his eyes. They were calm. Too calm for someone his age. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped together in front of him like he was praying. His eyes didn't move. They were locked on her, steady, and full of something she couldn't quite name. "Miss, please," the boy said softly. Marla frowned. Her security guard stepped forward, ready to move him away, but she raised her hand. "What did you say?" she asked. The boy didn't move. "Please don't go," he said again. "Something bad is going to happen." Marla tilted her head. "What are you talking about? What's going to happen?" "The place with the silver lion in front," he replied quickly. "That's where it will happen." Her heart gave a small jolt. That building, the one with the silver lion statue, was the exact location of her meeting. Only her closest team knew that. It wasn't public. Her lips parted slightly in surprise, but she quickly shook it off. "Who told you that?" she asked, now crouching a little to speak more directly to him. "No one," he said. "I saw it. In a dream." Marla almost laughed. A dream. A hungry, tired boy with no shoes was telling her not to go to a business meeting because he had a dream. She stood up straight again. "You should be in school," she said, "not telling stories to strangers." But the boy didn't move. He didn't even flinch. "If you go," he said softly, "you'll be sorry." Marla turned to the guard. "Take him to the shelter on Hillcrest Avenue. Make sure he gets a hot meal." She walked toward the car, but as her hand reached for the door, it trembled slightly. Why? She couldn't explain it. She shook it off, got into the car, and gave the signal to drive. The driver pulled out slowly, and Marla picked up her phone. Her assistant started talking about the schedule, but her voice sounded distant. Marla's mind kept going back to those eyes, that voice, that strange stillness in the boy. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Suddenly, without warning, Marla sat up straight. "Turn around," she said. The driver glanced at her through the mirror. "Ma'am?" "Turn back." Now, he didn't ask again. He turned the car around and drove back the way they came. She didn't know what she was going to say. She didn't know what excuse she'd give for skipping the meeting, but something inside her said she had to go back. 30 minutes later, just as she was walking back into her home, her phone buzzed. A news alert flashed on the screen. Breaking. Explosion at Midtown Tower. Multiple injuries reported. Cause unknown. Marla stared at the screen. Her eyes widened. The photo on the news report showed the building she was supposed to be in. The same building, the same time. Her knees felt weak. She sank into a chair. That boy had known. That dusty little boy with no shoes. He had seen it before it happened. She stood up, rushed outside, and ran to the gate. But he was gone. Marla couldn't sleep that night. She sat alone in her living room, still wearing the same blazer from earlier, her phone glowing beside her on the coffee table. The news replayed the explosion on every channel. Sirens, smoke, flashing lights, and broken glass. The Midtown Tower, the Silver Lion building, had turned into chaos. Experts were calling it a gas leak. Others weren't so sure. But Marla Voss wasn't thinking about that. She was thinking about the boy, that small voice, that steady gaze, that simple warning, don't go. He had saved her life. And now, he had disappeared. By morning, Marla was already making calls. She contacted local shelters, food kitchens, and youth outreach groups. She sent her staff to nearby parks, street corners, and alleyways. Flyers were printed with a simple description. Young boy, yellow shirt, no shoes, thin, quiet, seen, outside Voss Estate. She offered a large reward, enough to make people stop and listen, but no one had seen him. Some said it was a trick, maybe a clever stunt. Others whispered that it sounded like something out of a storybook. But Marla knew what she'd seen. That boy was real. And he had known something no one else could have known. Each day passed slowly. Her team updated her every hour. Still no signs. The sun burned hotter. The streets grew busier. And still, the boy remained a ghost. Until the fourth day. Her driver, Thomas, had been taking a different route home after picking up supplies for the estate. As he passed a small bakery at the corner of Belridge Street, something made him stop. Behind a broken bench hidden between the wall and a row of old trash cans, a small figure was curled up like a cat. It was him. "Ma'am," Thomas said, over the phone, voice tight. "I think I've found him." Marla didn't wait. She was already halfway to the car before he finished speaking. When she arrived, her eyes scanned the sidewalk until she saw the boy. He was asleep, knees pulled to his chest, arms folded tight. His yellow shirt was darker now, stained and wrinkled. His hair was messy. There was a small scrape on his elbow, but it was him. Marla stepped out quietly and walked over. She didn't want to scare him. She knelt down, her voice soft. "Hey, it's me." The boy stirred. His eyes fluttered open. He blinked in confusion, then recognition. "You again?" he said, voice hoarse. "You saved my life," she said simply. He sat up slowly. "I just told you what I saw." "Come with me," Marla said gently. "Let me help." He didn't move. He looked down at his hands, dirt under his fingernails. "No one ever asked me anything." "Well," Marla replied, "I'm asking." He didn't smile, but he didn't say no. She brought him home. Not to a shelter, not to a center, to her home. That night the mansion was quiet. The boy sat at the kitchen table, small and still, eating a plate of rice and soup. His hands moved carefully, almost like he thought it would be taken away at any moment. Marla sat across from him, watching in silence. "What's your name?" she asked. "Noel." "Noel," she repeated, trying the name out loud. "That's a good name." He shrugged. "It's just a name." "Well, Noel, you can stay here tonight. We'll figure things out in the morning." He looked at her, eyes still guarded. "Why are you being nice to me?" Marla paused. No one had asked her that in a long time. "Because you were kind to me first," she said. and I think we both could use someone we can trust." Noel didn't answer, but he nodded slowly, then went back to eating. Marla showed him to a small guest room down the hall. The bed was made, fresh sheets tucked in tight. Noel stood in the doorway for a long moment, unsure. "It's yours," she said. "You don't have to ask." He stepped in quietly. His backpack, old and nearly empty, was clutched in his arms like treasure. He sat on the edge of the bed, not yet ready to lie down. Marla left the door slightly open. That night, she didn't sleep much. She sat by her window looking out at the quiet street, wondering how a child could carry so much weight in his eyes. In the morning, she found Noel already awake, sitting at the kitchen table again. This time, he had cleaned his plate. He still didn't talk much, but his eyes were softer. "Do you remember anything else?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "Just the dream. I see things sometimes, but I don't know why." Marla nodded. She didn't press him. What she did know was this: Noel wasn't just a boy from the streets. He was something rare, someone special. And somehow, for reasons she didn't understand yet, their lives had crossed at exactly the right moment, and she wasn't about to let him disappear again. Months passed, and the world began to see a new side of Marla Voss. The sharp, distant businesswoman who once ruled boardrooms with silence and spreadsheets was now spotted walking beside a boy through quiet parks, bookstores, and even schoolyards. People whispered, papers speculated, but Marla didn't care. For the first time in a long while, she had something more important than deals and deadlines. She had Noel. At first, he barely spoke. He didn't trust the soft furniture, the warm food, or even the quiet mornings. He kept his backpack close even when he slept, and he flinched whenever someone raised their voice, even if they were just calling his name. But Marla never rushed him. She gave him space. She didn't ask about his past. Instead, she showed him how it felt to be safe. She enrolled him in a private school where the teachers were patient and the classrooms were small. He was shy at first, but curious, always watching, always thinking. At home, he helped around the kitchen, sat through Marla's meetings, and sometimes listened in on her phone calls with her team. What surprised her most wasn't his interest, it was his sense. Noel had a way of knowing things, not in a magical way, but in a quiet, strange way. He could tell when people were lying. He could guess how a meeting would go before it even started. Once, he told Marla not to invest in a deal because it felt wrong. 2 days later, the company announced bankruptcy. Marla joked that he was her business compass, but deep down she knew it wasn't a joke. One evening, they were sitting on the balcony, watching the city lights below. Noel sipped hot cocoa, while Marla scrolled through emails. "My mom used to get dreams," Noel said suddenly. Marla looked up. He rarely talked about his past. She said sometimes they were warnings. Sometimes they were memories from other people's lives. She said I might have it too. Marla set her phone down. What happened to her? He was quiet for a moment. There was a fire. The building caught fire one night. We tried to get out, but she didn't make it. Marla reached across and gently touched his hand. He didn't pull away this time. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He nodded but didn't speak again. The night continued in silence, but something had changed between them. A layer of trust had been added, unspoken, but strong. Weeks later, Marla was cleaning out old files from a storage room in her office. It was mostly paperwork from years ago, leases, contracts, letters. She opened a dusty folder and scanned a document. Her eyes stopped on a name, Leora Boone. Apartment 5B. The name tugged at something in her memory. She flipped through the file. The building name. The date. The fire report. Her heart dropped. It was the same apartment complex Noel had described. 12 years ago, Marla's company had briefly owned that low-cost housing unit before selling it. She had never visited the building herself. She didn't handle repairs or maintenance, but the papers were under her company's name. The fire, the one that had taken Noel's mother, had happened on a property she once owned. Her hands trembled as she stared at the file. Could it really be the same person? That evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Marla asked gently, "What was your mother's full name?" He looked up. Leora Boone. The folder was still on her desk upstairs. Her throat tightened. She took a deep breath. "Noel, there's something I have to tell you." He listened as she explained. Every word felt heavy, but she didn't hide. She told him the truth, that she once owned the building, that she never knew about the fire until much later, that she hadn't realized the connection until now. Noel didn't interrupt. He just watched her, his expression unreadable. When she finished, she braced for anger or tears, but Noel didn't shout. He didn't cry. Instead, after a long pause, he said, "Then maybe this was supposed to happen." Marla blinked. "What do you mean?" "If that hadn't happened," he said, "I wouldn't have ended up at your gate. You wouldn't have stopped that day. We wouldn't be here." His voice was calm, but Marla saw the sadness behind it. She reached across the table and held his hand. "I'm so sorry," she said again, voice low. "I don't blame you," he replied. "You didn't know. And you saved me too." In that moment, something shifted between them. They were no longer just a woman who had saved a boy, or a boy who had given a warning. They were something deeper. Two people tied together by something far more powerful than chance. They were a family. Years passed quietly but meaningfully. The city changed, the skyline grew taller, and the streets became busier. But in the heart of one of the tallest buildings in the city, a quiet miracle had been unfolding, one that didn't make headlines every day but was shaping lives all the same. Noel was no longer the quiet, barefoot boy standing outside a mansion gate. He was 17 now, tall for his age, calm as ever, with the same thoughtful eyes that once stopped a billionaire in her tracks. But now, those eyes carried confidence. He wore suits that fit, spoke in meetings without fear, and still had that strange, quiet ability to know when something wasn't right. He had grown into something rare, a young man with both heart and wisdom, and beside him always was Marla Voss. Their bond had only grown stronger. Marla hadn't just raised him, she had walked beside him every step of the way. From the moment she gave him that guest room, to enrolling him in the best schools, to teaching him about business, trust, and people, she never held anything back. And Noel had never wasted a single chance. But what defined them most wasn't just what they gained, it was what they gave. 2 years after Noel had come into her life, Marla launched a non-profit in memory of his mother. It was called the Leora Project. Its mission was clear: improve safety in low-income housing, provide fire prevention education, and give support to families like the one Noel had once belonged to. Noel wasn't just the face of the project, he was its heart. By age 16, he was giving speeches at fundraising events, working with architects on building designs, and even leading budgeting discussions. People often forgot he was still a teenager. He didn't act like one. He carried himself like someone who had seen both sides of the world and chosen to change it. At a gala one summer evening, the city's mayor handed Noel an award. Cameras flashed, guests clapped, and Marla stood beside him, pride shining in her eyes. When the applause settled, a reporter stepped forward. "Do you remember the day you stopped Ms. Voss at the gate?" the reporter asked with a smile. Noel nodded. "Of course. Did you know who she was then?" "No," he said, smiling softly. "I just knew something bad would happen. I didn't know her name or how powerful she was. I just knew she shouldn't go." "And now?" He glanced at Marla, then looked back at the crowd. "Now she's the reason I'm alive. And more than that, she's the reason I know who I am." There was a pause, a silence filled with emotion. Marla didn't speak. She couldn't. Her eyes were full. Later that night, as they drove home in the back of the same car that once took her away from that warning, Marla handed Noel a small white envelope. He opened it carefully. Inside was a key. "What's this?" he asked, confused. "To your office," she said, smiling. He blinked. "My office? You're ready, Noel. The next branch of the company, the one focused on social change, it'll be yours to lead. You'll build it from the ground up." He stared at the key in his palm. "Are you serious?" "As serious as I was the day I turned the car around." Noel looked out the window. The city skyline passed by, glowing in the night. Once it had felt cold and unreachable. Now it felt alive, like home. "I'll make you proud," he whispered. "You already have," she said. He leaned back in his seat, the key still in his hand. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. That night, as he sat at his new desk for the first time, he pulled a small, worn photo from his backpack, the one thing he had never let go of. It was a photo of him and his mother, taken years ago outside their old building. He placed it gently on the corner of the desk. Then he smiled. Noel had once been a boy with no shoes and no home, standing in front of a mansion with only a warning and a dream. Now he was a leader, a voice for others, a builder of futures, and, in the quiet of that new office, he whispered to the photo, "We made it." The story of the boy who stopped a billionaire spread quietly over the years, shared in whispers, online articles, and in classrooms that taught about courage and kindness. But Noel and Marla never chased the spotlight. They just kept working side by side for something bigger than themselves. People often called it luck, but Marla knew better. It was fate, a silent voice, a moment of trust, a future no one saw coming except a barefoot boy on a dusty sidewalk. And that, more than any fortune or fame, was the real success story.